sweet or savory, cold beverage or hot beverage, dog or cat. So the next time you order, inside the package with the gym wipes is a custom little box of dog treats addressed to your dog. Nate, when you get that, folks, if you're just listening, you can't see, Nate's eyes have gotten the size of the screen. His mouth is dropped. He's in shock. The research shows marketing to a cold audience, you have about a 20% chance of converting. But when you are marketing to people who are already customers, the conversion rate jumps to 60 to 70%. So depending on how you're looking at it, 3 to 3.5, 4 times, almost 4 times the conversion rate of investing into existing relationships. So when people ask, well, what should we do? I'm like, spend more money marketing to your existing customers. And a great way to market to them is with gifts and presents.
Welcome back to Horizons Podcast, where I convince marketing leaders to spill their secrets for the rest of us. I'm your host, Nate Desmond, and today I'm very excited to be sitting down with Joey Coleman. Joey started from a background in the CIA, the White House, and the U.S. Secret Service before becoming a best-selling author on customer and employee retention. And he's used his first 100 days methodology to level up the customer experience at brands like Hyatt, Zappos, Whirlpool, and NASA. Welcome to the call.
Nate, thank you so much for having me on the show. Such a treat to be here. I really appreciate the invitation. And thanks to everybody who's listening in. I trust that we are going to love the conversation, and I hope you as listeners are going to enjoy it as well.
It's going to be a lot of fun. I want to start with gifting. You have said that 2 to 10% of net profits should be set aside for gifting as a business expense. How do you convince businesses that this makes sense from an ROI perspective?
Well, what I think is fascinating, Nate, is when we talk about marketing dollars, no one hesitates to spend somewhere between 4 and 12% on marketing. And what's interesting about marketing is there's this age-old saying from a famous ad man who said, I know exactly, I know how much I spend on marketing and I know 50% of it works. I just don't know which 50%, right? And what I think is fascinating is we don't hesitate to spend on marketing to prospects, people that have no relationship with us. But whenever I talk about gifting our existing customers, people are like, "Oh, Joey, how much money are we going to spend on that?" It's like, wait a second, these are people that are already doing business with you. If you shift your thinking to this is marketing dollars for your existing audience, then the ROI becomes very trackable. In fact, the research shows market across all industries globally, marketing to a cold audience, you have about a 20% chance of converting. This is all industries averaged out, variety of different offers, product and service, et cetera, et cetera. But when you are marketing to people who are already customers, the conversion rate jumps to 60 to 70%. So depending on how you're looking at it, 3 to 3.5, 4 times, almost 4 times the conversion rate of investing into existing relationships. So when people ask, well, what should we do? I'm like, spend more money marketing to your existing customers. And a great way to market to them is with gifts and presents.
Do you think about that more in terms of upselling someone to a bigger purchase than they already are making, or in terms of retaining someone, say, on the current level of subscription or the current frequency of purchasing?
Well, what's so fabulous is many business leaders, Nate, think that the only way you can grow and the only way you can have a good business is if each year the people who spent money with you last year spend more money with you in the next year. And I think that's a really myopic view of growing a business. I would much rather have the customer who consistently spends the same amount every year that I can rely on, that I know is going to be there, that I don't have to worry about, than the customer that, well, maybe I can inch them up a little further. Maybe I can get a little more, because eventually you reach the point where that effort to upsell, and let's be candid, no human in the history of the world enjoyed being upsold. They didn't enjoy it personally. They may have made the purchase, but the process of being upsold is usually not a fun process. And so one of the things that I think is important for us to keep in mind is that we can have two different types of customers. We can have the customers that are slow and steady wins the race, and we have the customers that are growing quickly. I'm cool with both. I just don't want you to presume that a customer falls into one of those categories without checking in with them.
I know a word for a sponsor. It's me. I'm actually not taking any sponsors in season 1, but I just wanted to say thank you for listening. It's been such a joy recording these episodes, and I hope you enjoy them as much as I have. If you would like to support the podcast, the single most impactful thing you can do is leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening. This will help new people discover the podcast. And if you have someone in your life who's passionate about marketing, send this their way. They'll probably love diving into these insider tactics and stories. With that, back to the conversation. Fair. And how would you approach gifting for those two different segments? So would you give different gifts, or would you say, okay, this is a fast growth segment, we're going to allocate $100 per customer here for gifts, and this is a stable segment, so we're going to allocate $10 per customer here?
Well, this falls into that same category when in doubt, when we think about businesses, I think it's useful to think about ourselves, right? And our personal lives. So let's talk about dating and marriage. All right. I've been married for 15 years. Now, one could argue that the anniversary gift for the 10th year, it's okay to have it be the same as the anniversary gift for the first year because, it's just slow and stable. Like the relationship still continued. No, here's the things, friends. If you want the relationship to go to the next level, what are you willing to invest? And next level doesn't just have to mean more money, more sales. Next level could be easier interactions. Next level could be more autopilot interactions that don't require as much of your team's effort or time. Next level could be more referrals. It could be more testimonials, them singing the praises of your organization or your firm far and wide. All of these things have value to your business, but so often we have this view that, well, if I'm going to spend $5 on a gift, I darn well better get $50 in value. I would encourage people to look at their personal lives and ask, oh, well, I spent $100 on the anniversary gift. Am I going to get $100? That kind of scorekeeping is not successful in our personal lives, nor is it successful in our business lives.
And it is interesting how we see this in the more high touch industries, like real estate, for example. I remember growing up, we had a real estate agent and we only worked with them maybe twice, as far as I remember in my lifetime. But every year they would send a calendar, they'd send something that was like a fun little gift. So we would remember them. And they know to do that. Why is it that in bigger companies, sometimes we forget that these things matter?
Well, I think you, in many ways, you got lucky, to be candid, because I think some real estate agents know that, but many don't. So what's fascinating is if you look at, I know you're based in Singapore, but I know the data for the United States pretty well. So forgive the Amerocentric view here. But in the United States, when they interview people who have purchased a home, the week after they purchase their home, and they say, what was your experience with your real estate agent? And would you work with them again? Depending on the research you look at from the National Association of Realtors, somewhere between 85 and 93% say, oh, yes, absolutely. I would work with them again. We had a positive experience. When they track those people and they go back and they look at the next time they buy a home and they ask them, did you use that same real estate agent you used on the first home? The research shows only 11% did. Now, stop and think about that. We go from an 85 to 93% approval rating right after the sale to only 11% being involved in the second house. The reason for that is because the real estate agent didn't do what the real estate agent that you experienced as a kid did, is stay in touch. Now, what's fascinating when we think about gifts, you mentioned a calendar. I'd be willing to bet, I'm not trying to disparage your real estate agent, but I'd be willing to bet that if they gave you a calendar, they gave the same calendar to all of their clients. Okay. This is the equivalent of giving the same gift to everyone you care about. I grew up on one of 7 kids, right? If my parents would have given the same toy to me that they gave to my 2 sisters and my 4 brothers, havoc would have reigned on Christmas morning, right? When we try to make gift giving simple, when we try to make it commoditized, when we try to make it, I know we'll just buy one thing and give it to everyone, you're not really giving a gift. A gift is something that when the recipient gets it, they say, they know me. They were paying attention when I was talking. They know something that matters to me, that's going to light me up, that's going to make me feel excited. Instead of, they took the easy route and found one thing that they could give to everyone. Now, I know it requires more effort, but most things that have high outcomes require significant effort.
There's a story that you've told that stuck with me, which I think this is more about employee retention than about customer retention, but they tend to blur the lines pretty quickly. And it was basically this idea of if you're in a business, I forget what it was, like a yard care business or something, and someone works overtime, do you just give them a bonus, like here's an extra $100, or do you give them a night out at the batting range with their best friend? And the second one might even cost less. It's probably very comparable, but it is so much more valuable to the employee and so much more meaningful to the employee. How do you scale
Absolutely.
that kind of high touch engagement?
How do you scale caring?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. How do you scale
Like, let's
caring?
think about it. This is the question, right? This is the fundamental question that we have to ask ourselves. How do we scale caring? Number one, we accept the reality that the way I care for you is not going to be the same way I care for everybody else I'm in a relationship with. We acknowledge that every human is deserving of a different depth and a different level of relationship. Now, what we can do is decide to find points of commonality or points of familiarity. That's a fun way to do it. So, for example, and Nate, hopefully you're okay with this. If not, you can cut it out of
100%.
the episode. When Nate and I were talking early on, there was something in the background of his view, and I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked interesting. It drew my attention, and I was like, "Oh, what is back there? What is going on?" And Nate was kind enough to unblur, just like he's doing right now. And we see in the background, and help me if I'm getting the description wrong, Nate, but it's kind of a curio cabinet here with lots of little miniature houses, like collectible little miniature houses. Do I have that right? Best I
That's
can tell?
exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah,
So here's what's fascinating. When Nate looks at my background, I have little miniature skyscapes from around the world. Like, what is the skyline, the cityscape? And these are all made by Lego. And what's really funny is while we were talking, I said to Nate, "Hey, what do you think about this one, buddy?" Right? Now, what's interesting about this is if you're not familiar with it, yes, this is Singapore. This is the cityscape of some of the most iconic buildings in Singapore, which is where Nate's based and where the podcast is based out of. So immediately we have a point of connection that is relevant to Nate's world, that is relevant to my world. He's got these little houses in the background. I've got these little Legos. It's not an exact match. He doesn't have Lego sets in his background, but now we have a different point of connection. And every single one of your customers has something going on in their life that is a connection point for you. The last thing I'll say on this is because you give the example with employees, do we give them money or do we give them experiences? The research shows globally, experiences are more valued and more memorable than the cash. Why? When given cash, as a general rule, most employees will spend that to pay down debt. They'll spend the money on their kids. They will use that money for something else that is more of a necessity as opposed to a delight. Whereas in the example you shared, if you give them the trip to the batting cage with their best friend, now they've had a memory. Now they've been able to expand the value of the gift beyond receiving it themselves to potentially receiving it with their best friend. Now, if you've got an employee who's really into baseball and going to the batting cages, this is going to be an amazing gift. But if you don't know, if that employee is not at all into baseball, not at all into batting cages, is an introvert that would rather sit at home and read the latest romantasy novel, that's going to be a bad gift. It's not that the gift is bad, it's that the pairing of the gift with that recipient doesn't work.
yeah.
That's where we get the opportunity to think differently. Last thing I'll say on this is you said, well, how do you scale it, Joey? How do we scale caring? Well, the easiest place to start is almost every business owner or business person listening to our conversation has a CRM, a customer relationship management tool. That can be a piece of software. It can be the notes field in your app on your phone. It can be literally a notebook where you've written down by hand in a notebook, oh, this customer likes this customer likes that. Very few businesses have an ERM, an employee relationship management system. Do you know whether or not your employees are married? Do you know whether or not they have children? Do you know what their children's names are? Do you know how long they've been married? Do you know if they're dating? Do you know what their hobbies are? Do you know what their favorite sports team is? Do you know where they went to school? Do you know who they cheer for in the big game? Do you know where they like to go on vacation? These are kind of basic ante up chips to sit down at the table of a relationship. And yet, most of us have no idea what that answer is for our employees.
Oof, that is powerful. And it's once you know those things that you can get the gift that money
Exactly.
cannot buy.
Exactly. And then, or you can get the gift that money can buy, but that hits personally.
Yeah.
My assistant is fantastic. She's an amazing human being. She does a great job. And there is a band that she really likes. Now, this is a band that, to be candid, most people have never heard of. It's a smaller regional band, but she really likes it. She happened to mention in passing one day that she liked this band. And I went online and I looked, and they weren't playing in somewhere where I could gift her tickets. But what I could gift her was t-shirts from the band, right?
Yeah.
So I go on their website, I buy some of their merch, I have it sent to her house as a gift, as a thank you for doing some great work with me. That transcends just giving her a t-shirt with my logo on it. Okay, if I give her
Yeah.
a t-shirt with my logo on it, that's a uniform, folks, not a gift. If I give her a t-shirt with her favorite band's name on it, that's something she's going to wear. That's a different conversation.
And how do you build? I suspect I know some of the answer to this. How do you build a culture at a company? Like, let's say you're a company that has 50 people who are interacting with different customers. How do you empower those 50 employees to bring this gifting culture to the company?
Well, I think you do a couple of things. Let's look at three quick things you should do. Number one, you can't ask an employee to deliver a remarkable experience for a customer if they have no context for what a remarkable experience is. You can't just say to your employees, hey, start giving great gifts if you've never given them great gifts, if they don't know what getting great gifts is all about. So, first and foremost, you have to show your employees the way you want them to treat the clients and the customers by the way you treat them. So that's step number one. Step number two, everybody on your team should be incentivized to listen for the golden nuggets that fall from the sky. What do I mean by that? When you are in conversation with a customer, they are going to share information that allows you to make personal and emotional connection. You might say, "Oh, how you doing today, Nate?" And you might say, "Oh, I'm really well. I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things. We just got back from spring break." "Oh, where'd you go for spring break?" "Oh, well, we went to Australia. We were down on the Gold Coast." "Oh, amazing." These conversations happen in business all day long. Rarely do they get written down. Now, if I write down Nate went to the Gold Coast on spring break, now, next year, when hopefully we're still in relationship and it's coming up to spring break, and I say, "Hey, Nate, headed back to the Gold Coast for spring break? Or are you going somewhere different this year?" Now Nate says, "Oh my gosh, how does Joey remember that? That's really cool. Oh, heck, we are going back to the Gold Coast. We go there every year. We love it." Now you give me that information. Now I know you're going every year. Then the next year, maybe I send you some sunscreen before you go to the Gold Coast, right? So we use the information. So we incentivize our people to listen for the golden nuggets, capture those, and write them down. Last but not least, the third thing you want to do is give them a budget that they have to spend, not a discretionary
Yes.
that they can spend, that they have to spend. And a way I love to do this just in the beginning is to say, okay, you have $50 a month that you have to spend on a client or clients. Here's the requirement. When we do our monthly team meeting,
Mm.
we're going to go around the circle and everybody's going to have to share what client they got a gift for and what gift they got, or what clients. See, because it's not about the expense of the gift,
Yeah.
it's about the thoughtfulness of the gift. If I were to ask you to make a list of the best gifts you ever received, Nate, chances are pretty good that the majority of them cost less than $50. It wasn't that they were expensive gifts, it was that they were meaningful gifts.
It is the thought that goes into it. And I love that core insight of here's a budget, not that you can spend, but that you have to spend. Because it reminds me of I don't know if it's still popular, but this vacation policy was popular in tech circles for a while of saying, oh, you have unlimited vacation. You can take
Right.
all the time you want. And the reality
Totally.
is no one takes it because we all
People
feel
didn't
bad.
take the
Like,
vacation. That was the crazy thing.
exactly.
All these companies that went to unlimited vacation, nobody would take the vacation. Yeah.
Exactly. But if you flip it and you're like, you have 10 days of vacation, great. Now you're going to actually take those 10 days, hopefully a lot more than that, as your vacation. I want to flip to some of your past. You started your career very differently from how many people do. You're at the CIA, you're at the White House. How did that experience, and I believe you were a lawyer initially, how did that inform the way you think about retention?
So I've definitely had an eclectic career, Nate. You are right. When I moved to Washington D.C. after college, before I attended law school, and while I was attending law school, I was living in Washington D.C. and I had always thought that working for the Secret Service, working at the White House, and working for the Central Intelligence Agency would be really fun jobs. And so what I decided to do is I'm going to make sure that before I leave Washington, D.C., I've worked for these three organizations. I just decided this was going to be a goal. And so I ended up first working for the Secret Service, then for the White House, then for the CIA. And the order is relevant because in those jobs, you needed security clearances. So when I worked for the Secret Service, I got my secret security clearance. Then when I went to go work for the White House, they said, oh, you already have your secret clearance. It's much easier to take someone from secret to top secret than from no clearance to top secret. So they dialed things up to take me to top secret. So now I'm working at the White House and I have top secret clearance. Then I apply to work at the Central Intelligence Agency. Similarly, they look at this and go, wait, this guy who's applying already has top secret. So all the vetting and the background checks are already done. We can take him to top secret SCI, which is sensitive compartmentalized information, which is the highest level, sometimes referred to as code word clearance, right? And so each of these were stair steps that I was able to step up throughout the process. And I think the relevant connection to customer experience is in all of those jobs, and is my time as a criminal defense lawyer. I was a criminal defense lawyer for many years. In all of those jobs, the way you succeeded was by having a keen understanding of the human condition. Why do human beings do the things they do? And what can we do to convince, persuade, encourage them to do the things we'd like them to do? So as a criminal defense lawyer, how do I convince this jury to find my guy not guilty? As employee of the Central Intelligence Agency, how do I convince this person to tell me things that they might not be excited to tell me? Right? In the White House, how do I convince the public that this idea that the president wants to put forward is a good idea? Right? So just the exact same skill set, just applied in very different contexts. And it was only after leaving the intelligence community and the practice of law that I went and started my own ad agency. Did I start to think about how can I take these things I've learned about persuasion, about communication, about convincing folks, about marketing, about encouraging, and apply them in a business context, which is what I've done for 25 years now.
Do you ever regret not becoming the world's greatest buy through gifting the perfect gift to
You know,
everyone?
here's the thing. I am unbelievably privileged and fortunate that throughout my career, the reason I left jobs is not because I hated that job, but because I found a job that I loved even more. And so while I loved my time working at the Secret Service and working in the White House and as a criminal defense lawyer and working for the CIA, all of those jobs were amazing. And I had incredible, incredible life changing, life forming experiences. The experiences I've had after that chapter have had their own unique, amazing aspects that have made it all seem worth it along the way.
I want to sidetrack for a minute on this because a lot of people, and I've been talking to some people recently who are early in their career, they're worried about whether they can get into the job they want to get. And maybe they're underselling themselves and like, oh, I don't think I can even do that job. So they're shooting for something less. You've made big career switches that people would look at and be like, getting into the CIA is impossible. You did that. Then you were a criminal defense lawyer. Seems impossible. You did that. Then you start an agency. Seems impossible. You did that as well. What would you tell someone who is worried about whether they can get into their dream job in terms of how they can actually make that come to life?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. Number one, you have time. Oh my gosh, you have time. When you're in your 20s, you think that every week is the equivalent of a year. Wait till you're in your 50s, friends. Okay. I'm 52. So here's the thing. We always think that we've got to get it done right now. The game is long. All right. Don't worry if you don't get the perfect job right after you get out of school. Don't worry if you don't get the perfect job on the first try. Go to the place where you will learn, right? There's this phrase that, are you learning or earning? So many people think, well, I've really got to be earning. Friends, trust me. I mean, I get you've got to earn enough to pay your rent and pay for food and things like that. I don't disagree. But as a general premise, your expenses in the future will be greater than they are now. Just as a general premise. I mean, we can look at inflation. We can look at the economy. We can look at, finding a partner, potentially adding kids to the mix, whatever life choices you make, taking care of aging parents, any number of things. Your expenses are probably going to be greater in the future. So while they are at one of the lowest points they will ever be, don't worry about how much money you're making. Worry about how much you're learning. And then I would say be bold. So let me give you a quick story. I don't know that I've ever shared this publicly, but let me give you a quick story of how you can be bold into the thing you want. So I'm in law school and I have this goal to work for these different organizations. And I happen to see a posting that the United States Secret Service is looking for college interns. Now I'm in law school. I'm done with college, but I decide to apply. And I apply through the college intern program. The head of the intern program calls me and says, hey, I think there was a mistake. We've got your application here. You're applying for an internship and you're like, this is for college students. You're in law school. And somewhat cheekily, I said, yes, I'm trying to be the most qualified applicant you've seen this year, because I've already completed college. The person started laughing the same way you did, Nate. And they're like, that's a lot of chutzpah, that's a lot of bravado. And I was like, yeah, I get it. And I said, and I don't mean to be disrespectful. I just really have always been fascinated by the Secret Service. I love the work you do. I'm a lawyer now. I'm in law school. I'm learning to be a lawyer. So I was wondering if your legal team needed someone to come in and be a law clerk, because I have all the growing skills of a lawyer. And when I did my research, it seemed like your intern program does not place into the general counsel's office, your lawyers. And they're like, you're right, it doesn't. And I said, so what I was hoping you could do is go to that team and ask them, would they like free help? She's like, I don't know what they would say. And I said, yeah, neither did I. That's why I thought I'd ask you. And she's like, well, all right, I'll ask them and see what they say. I was the first intern, to my knowledge, in the history of the United States Secret Service that worked directly with the lawyers, and that's the way I came in. So at the time, the Secret Service had 7 lawyers that represented 2,000 agents worldwide. So when I show up, stop and think about, they've just gone from 7 people working on cases to 8. So even if I just picked up the grunt scut work, I dramatically increased what they could accomplish, right? Because now they had somebody that they could hand stuff off to. And here's the beautiful thing, friends, especially young people listening. They handed off making copies. They handed off doing research. They handed off getting coffee. But they also handed off big stuff. And the more I proved myself, the more they said, wow, this guy isn't just the typical person who is coming here to check a box and say they got an internship or do something like this. And next thing I know, it moved into a paid position. Next thing I know, it moved into a position where I had more responsibility, more authority, got my security clearance, all these things, because I was willing to say, hey, is there a path to this thing that is different than the path everyone else is taking? I want to acknowledge that that comes from a place of privilege, that I was even aware that you could path to things in a different way. But I think all too often, especially when we're young, we think that the rules of the game apply to everyone. And the older we get, we realize that there's a significant percentage of society that circumvents the rules. I want to be clear, not circumvents the laws, but circumvents the rules, the steps, the process. I've had the unique approach or maybe warped mindset from a very young age to do this. When I was in college, I talked my way into a business school course, even though I was a government and international relations major, right? I talked myself into different clubs and different organizations and different groups because I was just interested in what they were doing. And lots of times, if you show up interested, that is enough to make you interesting
Yes.
to the people who are deciding whether or not they want you to be part of their group.
And sometimes you run into a brick wall and you just have to get up and run at another brick wall and
Hundreds,
see if it turns out.
hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of brick walls that I've run into over time, right? And the
Yes.
benefit of having decades of work experience is you get to point back to some of the things that did work. There are plenty of things that didn't work, plenty of things that I tried that were just epic fails. I mean, I went and interviewed with the rainmaking senior partner at one of the biggest law firms in the United States. And he said, Joey, now that you're going to be graduating and be a lawyer, we're thinking about bringing you in. What do you want to do for our firm? And I was like, I want to be a rainmaker. And the guy's like, I meant what kind of law? I said, yeah, no, I understood your question, but I wanted to tell you the result I'm going for. My gut instinct is you don't have enough rainmakers here. You got plenty of lawyers here. You don't have enough people out getting clients. And he goes, damn, kid, how did you know that? And I said, because I know humans. This was not a giant reveal. Every business on the planet
Needs
wants to
more
grow,
rainmakers.
wants more
Yeah.
rainmakers, right? Was it bravado to pitch myself as a rainmaker at 23 years old? Yes. Did they hire me? No. But I took my shot. I told them what I would do. I told them what my goal was. And instead, I went and I was a rainmaker for someone else. And that's okay. But it's that age-old sports reference. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Why not take it? That's the thing that fascinates me about our society today. I think there's a lot of people that are scared. I think there's a lot of people that are nervous, and I understand that, and I empathize with that. But there will never be an easier time to try something new, to go out on a limb, to roll the dice, than right now. It will only get more difficult in the future. It's a lot harder to say, hey, I might start a new business when you're married and have 2 or 3 kids and a mortgage. It's a lot harder to say, I'll take the job where I'll learn instead of the job where I'll earn when you're in your 50s than when you're in your 20s, right? So if I have a message for folks out there, regardless of your ages, it will always be more challenging in the future than it is right now. So just try it now. Just try it now. And recognize that everyone fails. And my theory always has been, is it going to lead to a good story? If it's going to lead to a good story, I'm willing to try it. And the story could
Yeah.
be, I told you the Rainmaker story. Is that a good story or a bad story? Well, in my telling of the story, it's a good story. Some people looked at that. Some of my classmates were like, you're an idiot. You said what to the senior partner? I was like, I told him what the reality was going to be, what I felt my job there was going to be. And here's the interesting thing. He later reached out to me and said, Joey, I advocated for that we hire you. The other partners wouldn't get behind it. You were my number one choice, but I couldn't convince the other partners to get behind it. At least I tried.
Isn't it interesting the stories that we tell ourselves matter so much? Because you could easily have taken that and been like, see, the strategy doesn't work. I shouldn't be selling myself like this. When in reality, he was sold and he was trying to sell you to the other partners.
Totally. Totally. And here's the thing, your story may work one time, but not the next time. Or your attempt may work on attempt number 5, but if you quit after attempt number 3, you never know if it's going to work. I think it's so fascinating. And I understand it from like a human psychology point of view. I understand it. But our fear is such a delimiting power. When the reality is, with each passing year, there's actually less things to be afraid of. I've got 2 young boys. We were talking about this the other day. When I turn on the faucet and I drink water, now, full disclosure again, I live in Minnesota. In the United States, when I turn on the faucet and drink a glass of water, I don't worry about if I'm going to die. There are places in the world where you go and you get a glass of water, and that glass of water might kill you. If I were to turn on a faucet anywhere in Singapore, I'm going to live.
You're good
I'm
to go.
good. I'm more than good to go, right? So many of these things that we used to be really afraid of, we don't have to be afraid of today. But what has our monkey brain done? It has figured out other things to be afraid of. Well, what if I ask for a raise and I don't get it? I better not ask for the raise. Well, what if I try to start that side hustle and it doesn't work? I better not start it. Well, what if I see that person across the bar and I go up and I ask them, can I buy them a drink or can I sit down and talk to them? And they say no. Well, they might say no, so I better not go. What? Like, you're never going to get the yes unless you ask enough times getting no's.
Yes.
And I think we have the opportunity as humans to increase our resiliency to the word no.
That's such a good message. That is such an important message. And the other thing that came to mind as you're talking about this is time horizons. Because as
Yes.
humans, we think in such short time horizons. We think about what's going to
Blips,
happen this week or today.
blips.
And we
Yeah,
miss, like, in the next 10 years, or I'm a Christian, we miss eternity. We miss these
totally.
longer term time horizons and we think about our next meal. We make the wrong choices. We make the choice that's optimizing for tomorrow rather than next decade. So
Nate,
easy
it's
to do.
so true. It's so true. And here's the crazy thing. And this is not meant to put you on the spot because if you ask me the same question, I think I'll answer the same way. What was your great 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 grandfather's name?
I have no idea.
What did he do?
Zero clue. Okay, one clue.
Was
I
he
think he
successful
might.
or unsuccessful? Did he try or did he not try? Did he live his dreams or not? This is in your lineage, just past the time horizon of your life. Because were you fortunate enough to know your grandparents?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Were you fortunate enough to know a great grandparent?
No.
Okay. So I'm one past that in my hypothetical. And yet we're so paralyzed about, well, what if I screw this up? No one's going to know. No one's going to know. In
True.
100 years, no one's even going to know your name, let alone whether you tried, whether you failed, whether you got the goal, whether you didn't get the goal. We are a blip in the cosmic line, right? I had an amazing experience 2 weeks ago. I had the chance to spend some time with an astrophysicist in Mexico, and we were looking through a telescope at the Orion Nebula, and we were talking about how many millions of light years away, and that what we were looking through the telescope happened years and years and years and years and years and years and years in the past. It might not even be there anymore. But we don't know because the light is still working its way towards the earth. We are cosmically insignificant, and yet we act like we are the only thing in the cosmos that matters. And it's like, take the risk, roll the dice, give it a try. I promise you the consequences are exponentially smaller than you think they are.
And we act as if we're the center of the universe, and therefore that means we should not do anything. Versus, like, go do something. Go do something.
Totally.
Speaking of this note of human, you've talked about how every form of marketing and sales is human to human. There's no B2C, there's no B2B. Everything is human to human. Thinking particularly in the B2B space where people sometimes miss that, how do you think about the human connection when it comes to marketing B2B thing?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. I think we came up with the acronym of B2B or business to business to justify not being human. I mean, if we really look at it, where did we
Yeah.
come up? We're like, well, this is going to be different than dealing with consumers. So we're dealing with a business. So it's going to be, no, it's still humans. So if you are in what you might describe as a B2B business, your H to H, your human to human is even more important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it'll distinguish you in the marketplace. If you actually know them as an individual, totally distinguish you in the marketplace. Number two, businesses don't buy. Humans at businesses buy, right? The human at the business is the one who's reviewing your proposal. The human at the business is the one who's saying, let's hire Nate. The human at the business is saying, let's cut the check to Nate. The humans are doing that. There's no entity, this business, that is making these amorphous decisions, at least not yet. Maybe with AI in the future,
Yeah,
there's a
give it a few
conversation
more
to be
weeks.
had, right? But here's the thing. Humans are making the decisions. So if humans are making the decisions, why aren't we treating them like humans? Oh, and by the way, when that human leaves, and this is where business to business organizations get punched in the face. What happens when that long-term relationship you've had with your B2B client, when your point of contact leave, everyone starts freaking out.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we got to get a meeting with the new person. Who is the new person? We don't even know who the new person is. They didn't even say they were leaving. What's going on? And it's like, well, then you actually didn't have a relationship with the business either.
Yes. Where did the
Because if you
B2B?
would have had a relationship with the business, the human leaving shouldn't impact the business. It's a fallacy in our minds that B2B is a thing. It's H to H. And when we double down on the human aspect of our interactions, what that allows us to do is recognize that we don't have one point of contact at our business client. We have dozens. We have the person who's our main point of contact, but what about their assistant? What about the other people that report to them? What about the people they report to? What about the people that use your product or use your service in the business? Those are all potential advocates and allies within the organization. And yet we have a tendency to have this myopic view where we're only focused on who's the decision maker. Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I love the completely ineffective technique of my phone ringing and I answer the phone and this is Joey Coleman at Design Symphony. And they're like, are you the decision maker? Yes, I am. And I've decided that we're not going to talk today. Have a great day.
Yes.
What are you seeking a transaction or are you seeking a relationship? I'm not saying one is better than the other. I'm just asking you to be really, really clear on what you're seeking. Transactions or relationships? Relationships require much more work, but they have much more value.
Which is where exactly the retention comes in. And you've talked about 8 phases, I believe it is, in the customer journey. They all start with A, assess, admit, affirm. What are these phases and how should companies be thinking about them?
Yeah, so let me give you a speed review of the phases, Nate, okay? Because you're right. They all start with A. There's 8 of them. And the reason they all start with A is not to confuse you, but you've got to get each of these phases right. And it's like getting straight A's on your report card in school. Like you're doing a great job if you get each phase, but you got to get each one right. And you've got to take them in sequence. Every customer in every business will go through these 8 phases, has the potential to go through these 8 phases. And they're all going to go through at least the first 4 for sure. And then it's how you focus on the last 4 to see whether they will continue to move through those. Let me give you a quick overview. The first phase is the assess phase. In the assess phase, a prospect is considering whether or not they want to become a customer. In common parlance, we call this marketing and sales. They are assessing whether what you have is something they want. In phase 2, the admit phase, the prospect admits that they have a need or a desire or a problem that they think you can help them with. They decide to make an investment with you. They transition from being a prospect to actually being a customer. We then go to phase 3, the affirm phase. I'd ask everybody listening to think, have you ever heard of the phrase buyer's remorse? Most people have. And yet most businesses do not have a system and a process in place to address the buyer's remorse that we scientifically know every customer is going to experience. Phase 3 is the affirm phase, where we affirm the decision they just made so that we address that buyer's remorse. We then come to phase 4, the activate phase. This is the first real moment of truth, right? This is where we want to activate the relationship. We want to energize things. We want to let them know that doing business with us is unlike any business experience they've ever had. In a product scenario, this is where they get the product and they're holding it in their hands. In a services scenario, this could be a kickoff meeting. This could be the first time you start to deliver on the service. What are you doing to say at that real moment of truth, this is going to be different? We then come to phase 5, the acclimate phase. Now, in the acclimate phase, the customer gets used to your way of doing business, your cadence of communication, the steps in your process, the sequence of operations. You've done this hundreds of times, thousands of times, tens of thousands of times. But to a brand new customer, they have no idea what comes next. They have no idea what your system and process is. You've got to hold their hand while they acclimate to your way of doing business. We then come to phase 6, the accomplish phase. The accomplish phase is when the customer achieves the goal that they originally had when they decided to start doing business with you. Every customer has a reason for making the purchase decision. Every customer has a vision that they're trying to create, a problem they're trying to solve, something they're trying to fulfill when they buy your product or service. If we don't know what that is and we don't track their progress to it and we don't celebrate with them when they accomplish it, we have no hope of getting them to the final phases. Which brings us to phase 7, the adopt phase. When a customer becomes loyal to you and only you, they've adopted this relationship. They take ownership for it. They're bought in. They're loyal. They're going to continue to be a customer. And if, and only if, Nate, we've gotten them through all 7 of these phases, do we have the right, the privilege, the opportunity to invite them to the 8th and final phase, the advocate phase, where they become a raving fan, singing your praises far and wide, writing reviews, referring new business to you. These are the type of customers that every business wants, but they want people to jump from the assess phase to the advocate phase immediately. We start asking for reviews immediately when I haven't even gotten the product yet. Why are you asking me for a review when I'm still waiting for the product to arrive? Why have you asked me for a review when I haven't experienced the service? Why are you asking me for referrals when we've just done one little small interaction with each other? You want me to put my social capital, my reputation on the line to refer business to you? I'm sorry. We're going to need to be in relationship for a while before I will recommend you, because a referral is a recommendation that
Yeah.
you should do this. And I'm not going to tell anybody that they should do something unless I'm really sure that they're going to get the results.
Yes, because
So
then your
those are the 8
reputation is on
phases.
the line. That's
Correct.
incredible. And it's fascinating how we so often, at least in marketing, think about this as acquisition and retention. Yet
Totally.
mapping that to these 8 A's, acquisition is just the first one. The other 7 are all
Well, and
retention.
stop and think about how many people like the idea of being acquired.
Also true.
Not many. Not many. Some people are like, Joey, I'm trying to grow my business. So eventually it is acquired. Great. Talk to people who've actually sold their businesses and tell me if they enjoyed the acquisition process. They will tell you no. They will tell you no. They might have enjoyed the money that they got from selling their business, but they certainly didn't enjoy the actual selling of the business, the actual being acquired, or most of them didn't enjoy anything that happened after the acquisition.
Yeah.
So why are we chasing acquisitions? You'll notice acquisition actually isn't an A in the 8 A's. It could have been, but it's not. That's intentional.
And it's an important choice. The business language that we use is reflected in how we then speak to our customers and how we treat them. I'm
Yeah,
curious to go
words matter,
deeper.
Nate. Words matter. My mom in my family, my mom is famous for her saying that if we knew the power of our words, we wouldn't, our words have such impact on the people we associate with. We could stand as a species to be more discerning about the words we use when interacting with our fellow humans.
That is so
And that's
true.
from somebody who gets paid to talk. Like that, this is my job. I get paid to talk. I'm a speaker, right? And it's like, think close and think judiciously about the words you choose to use, especially when interacting with your employees, with your customers, with people you love, and most importantly, with yourself. The
Yeah.
words we use with ourselves, especially highly successful, overperforming individuals, the kind of people that listen to podcasts, are often words that if they were spoken to our best friend or the person we love the most in the world would be fighting words. We would jump in between and intervene in those words being spoken to someone we care about. And yet those are the type of words that most of us use when assessing our own skills, our own accomplishments, our own progress. What are we doing? let's think differently about it. And better yet, let's do differently when it comes time to talking, either verbally or the internal voices that are talking in our head.
That is so, so true and so crucial. So, so crucial. I don't want to stop talking about that, or maybe we should just stop talking entirely because it's a very good point. But I do want to talk a bit more about this affirm stage when people are going through buyer's remorse. This is something very few businesses think about. Who have you seen that does this well?
Well, I think there's a lot of examples of companies that do it well, and I'll share a story here of one of my favorites. But before I do that, let me just say this: even if you just acknowledge that the customer is in the affirm phase, now by that I don't mean send them a thing and say, "Well, since I know you're in the affirm phase, allow me to say you made a good decision." But even if we just thank someone for the purchase, even if we just say, "I'm excited to work with you." Even if we just say, we are working behind the scenes to get everything ready to get your package to you, or we're doing everything behind the scenes to get ready for the kickoff meeting, just let them know that you're actually excited. Lots of times when we get a sale, right? We hang up the call with the customer, the order comes in online, whatever. We're celebrating in our office. Woohoo! We landed the deal. We got them. This is awesome. As a general rule, they never know.
Yes.
And we think we don't want to show that, right? We're like, oh, I don't want to let them know how excited I was.
Vulnerability.
Why?
Yeah.
Why? Let them know you're excited. Let them know you're pumped. Let them know you're eager to work together. Those things are affirming in and of themselves. Let me give you an example of a company. There's a company called Zajics. Okay. Zajics is a company that sells B2B for those of you that want to come back to that, right? They sell to organizations around the world that have gyms and health clubs and spas. One of the products they sell is something called gym wipes. So have you ever been to the gym or the workout facility and seen the bench with the residue of the human who worked out before you, right? Gym wipes hang on the wall in a dispenser. You can pull one off the wall, wipe down the bench so there isn't an involuntary DNA transfer. Okay. Now they sell their product in an e-commerce setting. They've got a website. You go on the Zajics website and you buy some gym wipes. Later that day, you get a confirmation email. Now, any of us who are alive today are familiar with getting confirmation emails from e-commerce brands that we've purchased from. And most of them are pretty straightforward. You bought products X for Y amount, and it's going to be delivered on this date. Zajics is a little different. The email comes across, and across the top of it, for let's say you were the customer, Nate, it would say, "Thank you, Nate." You're like, what? And like in big bold letters. And then underneath it is a thumbnail image of a Zajics employee holding a clipboard with your name on it,
Wow.
and a button underneath that says start watching if you press the button. Now, here's the thing. Nate, folks, you heard it. Nate said, oh, wow, just hearing about what the email looked like. He hasn't even heard what the message says. We're just talking about what happens. And Nate is already going, wow, this is awesome. He's not even in the market for gym wipes, folks. And yet he's like, he's bought in. He's invested. You click on the button and it plays about a 30-second, 45-second video of a Zajics employee saying, "Hey, Nate, we just got your order for the wipes and the dispenser. Thank you so much for being a customer. We love helping gyms keep clean. We love looking out for our people. Let us know what you think of the product. Let us know what you think when you receive it and how it's working for you. Thanks so much for being a customer. We'll be in touch again soon when your product ships." I don't know about you, Nate. I've never received a personal customized video from an e-commerce brand. Now, the next question people often ask, and this goes back to the question you asked earlier, well, Joey, how do they scale this? Okay, this is not done with AI. They actually have a room in their offices where they have a camera set up and a different employee rotates. They do about 2-hour stretches. They rotate through employees. All of their employees have to do videos, and they film these videos. And so they've just got a list of all the orders, and they film the videos, and then they've got somebody who takes the videos and links them and sends them and sends them and sends them. Right? I have another client who heard this story. They sell over 1,000 products per day on their website. Now, stop and think about the volume of your business, friends. Okay. Are you getting 1,000 new customers a day? My gut instinct is it's a smaller number than that. No judgment, but Statistically, it's probably a smaller number than that. But they figured out how to do this at scale. Here's what they did. They took a list of all of their customers for the last year and they ran it through a spreadsheet to figure out what the 500 most common first names were and filmed 500 videos that didn't specifically say what the product was, but they would say, for example, hey, Nate, oh my gosh, your order just came through. Boom, dude, your first order with us. We are so excited. Thank you so much. We're going to be packing that up later today. It's going to get shipped out. You're going to get a separate email with the tracking number. As soon as you get it, you do us a favor, try it on. Let us know how it fits. Let us know what you're thinking, and then send back and give us some feedback on if it matched what you hoped it was going to be when you saw it on the website. Thanks so much. We look forward to hearing from you. You notice I didn't specifically talk about anything there, but it felt personalized. It felt high energy. After they did the top 500 names, they went and did the 500 least common names. Why? Because the common names, somebody might be skeptical and go, I bet they did this video for every need. But when the name was Ajabada, it's pretty sure that Ajabada only got that video custom made for them. And here's the thing, when Ajabada gets that video, what are they going to do? They're going to share it on social media because they can't believe that they just did business with $100 million plus company that sent them a personal video. Over the course of a year, they built a library of all the most common names. And now anytime an order comes in, it either immediately gets tagged with a common name video, or if it's a name that they've never had a customer do that name before, have that name before, they just custom film the video that day and it goes into the library for that name. It took them a year and now they have every name covered.
That is marvelous.
You can do it at scale. It just
and
requires
when you think about it, like in the old days, you would go to a store and someone checks you out and they can say your name in the process of checking out. Why can you not just do that on e-commerce?
Exactly. And here's the thing, Nate. A lot of people might say, oh, Joey, well, I bet I could do that with AI even cheaper. Probably. Should you? That's a different conversation. Yeah. I'm not saying no, but I'm not saying yes.
It's a lot
different
trickier
conversation, right? You want to think through the decision process in your organization of, are we systematizing and automating the points of connection, or are we systemating and automating the mundane task? How about we systemate and automate all the mundane tasks and tactical things and let the connection still be human for a while? Let that be the thing that's real.
Yeah.
At least that's my thought on how we should be thinking about this.
And continuing this thinking on scale, I want to jump back to when we were talking about gifting earlier. So let's take this Gym Wipes company. How should they do gifting?
I mean, they do a brilliant job of gifting. So let me talk about how they do gifting at scale, since that's what we're talking about. So after your first order, you get an email that basically says, hey, we're showing the order was received. Just wanted to confirm that it actually was. And it's got a couple buttons, yes or no. And then underneath it says, while we're at it, 3 quick questions: sweet or savory, cold beverage or hot beverage, dog or cat, with a little box that says other. A gigantic percentage of their customers answer those things. And on the other, they have a little field. And the people that hit dog or cat have a tendency to write the name of their pet in the other box. So now what do I know? I know your dog's name. So the next time you order, inside the package with the gym wipes is a custom little box of dog treats addressed to your dog. Nate, when you get that, folks, if you're just listening, you can't see, Nate's eyes have gotten the size of the screen. His mouth is dropped. He's in shock. Imagine pet owners. Some of you that are pet owners are getting excited right now just hearing a pet story, right? You're like, they would do that for my dog, for my cat. Here's the thing. They're changing the conversation. On the next order, maybe, depending on whether you wrote sweet or savory, you get custom treats from where they're based in Massachusetts. There's a candy company that they do some partnering with and things like that. So you get custom treats. On the hot or cold, then they come back and they say, okay, you said hot, coffee or tea, or other. And then they might write hot chocolate. See, when you create a little other field, people will tell you things that they wouldn't normally tell you. If I said to you, "Hey, Nate, we've just met. Tell me what your favorite beverage is," you might be like, "Hey, dude, really? We just met. Like, I don't know that I like if we're friends, I might tell you, or if we hang out for a while, but that's your opening volley." But they make it playful, they make it quick, they make it easy to gather some information that then when they feed it back, literally and figuratively, to that customer, the customer often forgets that they shared the information. They often forget that I said, I like sweets. Sweets just show up. They forget that I told you I had a dog. Dog treats just show up. And what does that do? That builds affinity and connection and love for Zajics.
That is absolutely incredible. How would you, okay, so I'm going to make this even more difficult because I'm fascinated by this idea of gifting. How would you do that if you're a purely digital company? Like, let's take a crazy example. Say you're, I'm blanking on examples right now, but say you're a purely digital company, you don't mail anything to your customers. How would you actually bring that to life?
Yeah. So here's the beautiful thing about digital offerings. As a general rule, the margins are insane on digital offerings, right? Because I mean, I sell you a hundred. Or let's give us an example. I sell you a $200 digital course with some videos and a PDF workbook that you get emailed, right? So reasonable, kind of a common offering. After I've made that, what does it cost to deliver that? Pennies.
Nothing incremental.
Pennies.
Yeah.
Nothing increment. There's the electricity, there's the, oh, we built the funnel that they click through and they process, but you're making almost $200 pure profit. Almost. Not fully, but you're pretty darn close. How about we say it cost you $50 to deliver it just for giggles? So you're making $150 profit. How are you going to use that $150? Well, if I'm a digital company, and I go back and I say 2 to 10% on gifting. So let's say 10% because I was told there would be no math on the podcast today. So now I have $15 to spend, right? Because I can do the math easier. So I have $150 and I'm going to spend $15 of it on a gift. When I came on your website to buy the course, Nate, how did I pay for it?
Your credit card,
Yeah. And what did I have to give you when I put in my credit card?
billing address.
So you do know where I live. You're just not using it that way. So now you send me a $15 gift to where I live, and it blows my mind. Why? Because my presumption was we were only going to have a digital relationship. And what you've done is said, we operate primarily in the digital space, but we deliver connection in the real world analog space. The more digital your company is, the more you have to think about analog interactions.
Oh, that's powerful. That's very, very powerful. Okay, I'm on board with this idea of gifting. I love how it comes
I
to
love it.
life in so many different ways. I want to talk about something you mentioned in a previous podcast, contractor podcast. You were talking about blue Kool-Aid moments. How do you use a blue Kool-Aid moment to avoid scope creep?
Yeah, I love this. So this you're referencing, I think, an interview I did with Logan at the Contractor Growth Network podcast. One of the challenges in the world of contracting, so like doing remodeling jobs for houses, right? Contracting is everybody says, well, this is what I want the kitchen to be. And then they start doing the work and they order all the stuff and they get going. And then they're, 3/4 of the way through. And the client says, well, what about the blue Kool-Aid dispenser? And you're like, I'm sorry, what? And they're like, yeah, remember, we need to have a dispenser in the kitchen that dispenses blue Kool-Aid, like a fountain drink type thing that's available at any time. And you're like, we never talked about this. I would remember a blue Kool-Aid moment. We never talked about this before. If you are in a business where what the customer asks for and agrees to in the beginning has a tendency to change once they start working with you, you have two choices as a business owner. You can get irritated and angry when there's scope creep, or you can recognize that this is the very nature of the human condition. There will always be scope creep. And so what you need to do is prepare and anticipate the scope creep before it happens. Now, most businesses do this, and I used to run an ad agency and I do consulting. This comes up all the time. They'll have some type of a clause in the contract that says, and if we increase scope, we will send you a new statement of work and you will have to approve the statement of work and sign off on it before we will bill more hours and blah, 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 blah. That's great for the lawyers. I am a lawyer. I can make fun of lawyers. But most human beings are human beings. They are not lawyers. So this is not an effective technique. Instead, what I like to do is as part of the sales conversation, I tell the story of the blue Kool-Aid dispenser. And then I say, now listen, folks, we're making your kitchen. I don't expect that you're going to ask for a blue Kool-Aid dispenser, but you might ask for something that's like a blue Kool-Aid dispenser in terms of the scope we're envisioning today and what we're going to do then. And if that happens, I'm going to say, folks, we're having a blue Kool-Aid moment. And that's going to be the alert to you that we are well beyond the scope of a reasonable request. And now we have to have a different conversation about two things: time and money. People's favorite two conversations. Because when you change what you want, it is going to increase the time. I'm telling you right here today, it's going to increase the time by a minimum of 30 days. No matter what the adjustment is, minimum of 30 days. And it is going to increase the expense by a not insignificant number. And I'd even give them a number. $1,000. No matter what the request is, it's going to increase the time and the expense. So let's make sure we do our best to scope it now. Now, here's the thing. If they come to the blue Kool-Aid moment and what they've decided they want is silver door handles in their kitchen instead of gold door handles in their kitchen, that may not increase it by a month. And it may not increase it by more than $1,000. But you have anchored them to know that that's the expectation. And then you can say, folks are having a blue Kool-Aid moment. I'm going to do everything in my power to switch over to the silver handles as quickly as and inexpensively as possible. But we're in a blue Kool-Aid moment. So I got to go get some information from the suppliers and on the delivery timetables and on the expense. And I'll come back to you with that. Now, if you come back and you say, you know what? We can make this one work in a week for $200. You're having a completely different conversation because you've explained before the problem happened. I have a belief that when we address things before they happen, it makes it exponentially easier to handle it when it happens. It may happen, it may not. I kind of don't care. You agree to the rules before it happens.
Yeah.
To make sure everybody's in a state of like, oh, we're feeling good and we're liking this relationship and we're excited. It's a different conversation.
I love that. So you anchor the expectation at a time when you're not adversarial, such that when you're at a time that could become adversarial, you're on their side. You're like, hey, I'm going to try to keep this under 1,000. Let me see what I can do.
And you make it a crazy story like a blue Kool-Aid dispenser that later when you go, we're having a blue Kool-Aid moment, they go, oh God, we talked about this. Instead of, we're having a change of scope moment. A what? A change of scope moment. Don't you remember in the contract, section B, where we had a paragraph about what would happen if there was change of scope? And they're like, I don't remember that in there. No, well, let me show you. It was in there. So now you've made it an adversarial moment.
Yes.
You, the business owner, have turned it into an adversarial moment because of your lack of pre-framing before they became a customer.
Is there
I just like to get this stuff out early.
Is there a way to identify these let's say you're in a business that's new, you're starting a new company, you haven't had a lot of customers. How do you know what will be the adversarial moments? Or is it sort of, you need to hit the speed bumps and then you can map them out for future clients?
Yes, and. Right? Yes, and. You can do your best. Mike Tyson has this famous saying, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right? You can, when you're starting a business, there's going to be a lot of punches. There's going to be a lot of things that you don't see coming. Do your best to think through what those are. And one of the favorite techniques I like, if you're thinking about starting a business, let's pick a business, Nate, so that you can decide the industry or the area. What's
Selling
some business that we can decide
equipment.
to start? Selling podcast equipment. Okay, so selling podcast equipment. So microphones, headphones, maybe software to manage a podcast. Great. The first thing I would do if I wanted to get into that business is, especially if like I'm a young person who's like, hey, I'm thinking about turning it, I would see if I could do informational interviews with 4 or 5 companies and their founders. And I would say, hey, I'm really interested in this. I'm considering getting into the industry. And one of the things I'm trying to identify is the real high points and the real low points. So, what would you say have been the best things for you having a career in this industry? What have been the high points? What have you loved? What have been the low points? What have been the things you weren't excited about? What is the thing that what are the 2 or 3 things that you wish you would have known about selling podcast equipment to podcasters before you got into business? And use other people's life experience to augment your understanding of your present reality. That plus your own thinking of it should get you to cover, I'm guessing, north of 75% of the things that are going to get thrown at you. Lots of times it amazes me the people who don't even cover the basics. You're going to have customers who don't pay. If you are in business, you are going to have customers who try not to pay. Is that going to be a big problem or a little problem? I don't know. Depends on your business, depends on the type of customers you serve, depends on your payment terms. So, for example, I am a speaker. I travel and speak on stages all over the world. I love it. Here's how my contract works. When you say, Joey, I want you to come to Singapore and speak on December 1st, I say, great, Nate. I would love to do that. We agree on what the price is going to be. We agree on the terms, et cetera, et cetera. And then I send you a contract. And people are like, oh, contracts. Yeah, the contract is a written agreement to make sure everybody's on the same page. Mine isn't called a contract. It's called a letter of agreement. It has the same weight in a courtroom as a contract, but I'm letting everybody know, no, this is just a letter of what you've agreed to and what I've agreed to. And
Yeah.
here are the payment terms. 50% is due the day we sign the contract. Everybody's like, oh, that sounds reasonable. It's a deposit. The second 50% is due 30 days before the event.
Interesting.
And you say, oh, wait a second. Why isn't it due after the event, Joey? Well, because after I give the talk, what recourse do I have to get money?
Yes. None.
None. It's
Absolutely
gone. The ship
nothing.
has sailed.
Yeah.
So if you want me to talk, and you do, you ask me to come speak at your event, these are the terms. The airline doesn't let you to pay after you get off the plane.
True.
You have to pay before you take the flight, and you have to pay 100% before you take the flight. The drive-through at the restaurant doesn't allow you to pay after you get home and have had the meal. You pay before they hand you the food.
Yeah.
Before I hand you a keynote speech, you're going to pay. Now, when I explain that to organizations, first of all, 90% of organizations are like, okay, these are the terms. They don't even ask. The 10% that are like, is there anything we can do? I say, okay, well, help me to understand what's going on. And they're like, well, we're not sure we're going to be able to sell enough tickets to afford you. Ooh, thank you for that bit of information. Now I'm even more anxious.
Yeah.
Or, well, Joey, our corporate policy only allows us to pay the deposit. We're not allowed to pay until after the event. Okay, my corporate policy has a penalty for payments that come after they're due of 10%. Should I just put that into the invoice? Now we're having a very different conversation. And I've had some clients that have said, yeah,
Go
Joey,
for it.
go charge us more. We just
Yeah.
can't do it. And then I get to decide as a business owner, is that a gamble? Is that a risk I want to take? And it should be the case that if you're asking for a deposit, the 50% you get up front should hopefully be enough to cover the buffer
Yeah.
of your fixed expenses, right? Now, you may not get your profit margin if they fail to pay, but you'll at least cover your hard dollar expenses. And will it be a life learning lesson? And will maybe you think up different terms next time? Sure. But so much of this stuff is like, we can anticipate that if you are in business, there are going to be customers who don't pay, or there are going to be checks that bounce, or credit cards that get declined, or things like that. Think through that stuff. If you're in the business of shipping things, there are going to be days where the postal carrier goes on strike, or there's a inclement weather that allows a package not to be delivered. If you sell a digital product on the internet, there's going to be a time where the internet is down.
Yeah.
sometimes on their end, sometimes on your end. We know that's going to happen. It's our job as the business to anticipate things that are going to negatively impact our customers' experience and to be ready to address those preemptively so that we're not trying to figure it out in the moment. Here's one of the things, I'll close with this. Here's one of the things I learned working in the intelligence community.
Yeah.
The worst time to figure out how you're going to deal with a scenario where everything's falling apart is when you're in the scenario that everything is falling apart. That's the worst time to try to figure it out. Your adrenaline is spiked, your fear receptors are up, your vision is narrowing, things are coming
Yes.
at you. That is not when you want to figure out this plan. You want to figure out this plan when you're sitting in a nice air-conditioned office. Everybody's calm and cool and collected. This is something that's going to happen in the future. And you scenario model, and if this happens, what do we do? And if this happens, what do we do? And if this happens, what do we do? And you figure those things out. And many people in businesses that are listening, you did that back in the day, but you haven't done it recently.
Ooh, yes.
Sit
Yeah.
down and review, because you've got members of your team now that don't know what those rules are. We go through that with our kids. I've got 2 kids, 9 and 11. We, on a regular basis, like about once every 3 months, at dinner, I'll just casually say, yeah, and what happens if we go to the movie theaters and you get separated from mommy and daddy and you don't know where they are? Let's talk through it. So it's
Plan for the
wrote in your
scenarios.
head. And
Yeah.
my kids know, first we do this, then we do this, then we do this. And when they were 5, that answer was different now than my son who's 11. And when he's 18, it'll be a different answer, right? But we as our business, as our family grows, we would think it's insane to have the same criteria apply. But as our
Yeah.
business grows, we're like, well, that's the SOP, that's our policy, that's how we do it. Well, have you gone back and looked at that stuff?
Yeah.
We review all the SOPs in my business on an annual basis.
Fair.
We have
Fair. To make sure
SOP
it's still
week.
relevant.
And we go through and we look at literally every single SOP, top to bottom. We look at every single one. It is a slog of a week. But here's the thing. When we get to the end of that week, you know what I don't have to think about for the next year is that we are dialed in on our SOPs.
Yeah.
We're dialed in. We're good. And if something happens that one anomaly check, we have a process. Hey, what happens if you go the SOP and something falls? We just had this recently. I travel a ton. One of the things my assistant does is she figures out what is the option for food at the hotel I'm staying at. Okay? Because lots of times a flight will be delayed, something will happen. What's available? So she had found out that this hotel that I was staying at had a restaurant. Sweet. They've got a restaurant. We're good. We found a hole in our SOPs 3 weeks ago. Restaurant hours.
Oh,
This restaurant was open for 2 hours in the morning for breakfast and for 2 hours at night for dinner. That's it. It's not even a restaurant at that point. Oh, and by the way, no room service.
my goodness.
Right? Now, here's the thing. Am I being critical of that restaurant or of that hotel? Absolutely not. But did we identify a flaw in the SOP? Yes. So now the question is, do you have a restaurant? And when Joey is going to be there on a Thursday, what are the hours for that restaurant?
Yeah.
And is there room service? And can you send me a menu now so we can look at the menu and see room service? They have beer and pizza. Well, I'd like to live a little bit longer than I am alive now. I'd like to live a lot longer than I am alive now. Only beer and pizza, not going to be a recipe for success. So what do we do? And so as our business grows and matures, we get better at identifying what are the questions we should ask. But if we
Yeah.
don't have a process of here are the questions we ask, you're not actually running a business. You have a hobby.
Ooh,
You have a
that's a
hobby
good
that you
point.
work really hard for and get underpaid for. That's not a business. A
Build the
business has systems, a
processes.
business has processes. Yes.
And I love how it's almost like as humans, we very often want to blame the things around us. And very often they are to blame. But it's much more efficient for us to say, hey, I picked up a scorpion, it bit me. Instead of blaming the scorpion, maybe I'm going to wear a glove next time, put that in the
Maybe
SOP.
100%. One of the things I think is the incumbent responsibility of every leader, and I try to do this myself. When something goes wrong, the first question you should ask is, how could I have prevented this? Not how could they have done it differently? I pick up the scorpion. How could I have prevented this? I could have put on a glove. I could have thought, do I really want to pick up a scorpion? I could have thought, do I know what kind of scorpion that is? I could have thought, am I in an environment that if that scorpion bites me, I can get help and an antidote? Or am I, 100 miles away from the nearest hospital? My behavior might be different on picking up a scorpion if I'm standing in a hospital that specializes in animal bites
Yeah.
versus I'm in the wild. Here's the thing. We think that we have to create these sweeping rules. I'm not asking you to create sweeping rules. I'm asking you to just have a series of questions and a series of ideas where you look at what could I have done differently before you ask what could the rest of the world have done differently. And this comes to one of my favorite things is when interacting with other humans, get curious before you get critical.
Oof. That is an important one as well.
Before you criticize, get curious
Why?
about what's going on. You see a child slap another child in the head. Your first thought is, we don't hit. We get critical. Why did you do that? I saw a mosquito on their head. Okay. Now I understand why you did it.
Yeah.
We need to now have a conversation of, even if we see a mosquito, we don't hit another person in the head. You can go like this with their hair and make the mosquito fly away, but we don't try to kill the mosquito.
Yeah.
Right? We have an opportunity as humans to be a lot more curious and a lot less critical. And I think we would benefit as a species from doing that.
Joey, this has been way too much fun. I think we would benefit as a species from listening more to you. Where can people go to learn more about you and the books you've written?
You're very kind. My books are called Never Lose a Customer Again and Never Lose an Employee Again. They're available wherever you like to get your books in hardcover versions, audiobooks that I narrate. So if you've enjoyed the sound of my voice, I'll read the book to you, ebooks, whatever format you like to consume books, they're available there. And the best place to find me is on my website, joeycoleman.com. That's Joey, like a baby kangaroo or a 5-year-old, Coleman, Coleman.com, joeycoleman.com. There's information there about keeping your customers, keeping your employees. And Nate, I just want to say thanks so much for a really fun, wide-ranging conversation. I loved your questions. Clearly, you did phenomenal research, and I really appreciate all the effort you put into making this a great show.
It's been a lot of fun. Well, thank you for coming on. All those links will be below if you're on YouTube or in the show notes if you're listening on a podcast. And Joey, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thanks, Nate.